When people think of Red Skelton, they often remember the silly clown who made America laugh for decades. He was the man of funny faces, playful voices, and hilarious characters that entertained families across the country. From the innocent child Junior to the goofy Clem Cadiddlehopper, Red seemed to live only for laughter. Millions tuned into his radio shows, his television programs, and his movies because he brought light-hearted humor during tough times. But behind that cheerful mask, Red carried a weight that very few ever saw. While the world believed he lived a perfect entertainer's life, those close to him knew there were struggles, secrets, and a private sadness that haunted him. His story was not just about jokes and applause. It was about survival, heartbreak, and hiding a side of himself that could have changed how fans saw him forever. Red Skelton was born on July 18, 1913, in Vincennes, Indiana. But unlike the joyful image people would later see on stage, his childhood was filled with hardship. His father, Joseph Skelton, had once been a circus clown but left the circus to work as a grocer. Fate, however, had a cruel plan. Before Red was even born, his father died, leaving his mother, Ida May, with 4 children to raise on her own. Poverty hit them hard. Neighbors whispered about how poor the family was, and some even told their daughters not to associate with Red, thinking he had no future. Ida did everything she could, scrubbing floors, running elevators, and taking whatever work was available. Red felt the sting of being judged, but instead of letting it crush him, it pushed him to dream bigger. At just 7 years old, he sold newspapers on the streets, shouting headlines just to bring in coins for food. It was during this time that he learned a powerful lesson: laughter could open doors. He realized that making people smile could change how they saw him. At the age of 10, Red's life took a dramatic turn. While selling newspapers outside the Pantheon Theater, he caught the attention of famous comedian Ed Wynn. Wynn bought every paper Red had, but he gave him something much more valuable than money. He took Red inside and showed him the magical world of show business from behind the curtain. Red saw the lights, the stage, the costumes, and the energy that came with performing. In that moment, he knew where he belonged. Shortly after, he quit school and joined Doc Lewis's traveling medicine show, performing small acts to sell so-called miracle cures. By the age of 14, he was working with theater companies, performing serious plays. But there was a problem. Audiences laughed at his dramatic lines. Even when he was supposed to make people cry, they found him funny. At first, this rejection hurt, but it revealed the truth. Red's gift was not in tragedy, but in comedy. He was born to make people laugh, even if he didn't plan it. The early years of Red's career were not glamorous. He performed on riverboats, in traveling shows, in circuses, and even in blackface minstrel acts, which were common but controversial at the time. Every night, he learned how to win over tough audiences. Sometimes the shows were filled with laughter. Other times the crowds were silent, but Red learned to adapt. He worked harder than most adults, always chasing the dream that Ed Wynn had planted in him. By his teenage years, he was no longer just a beginner. He was a full-time performer who had survived medicine shows, burlesque, and even Depression-era dance marathons. These experiences gave him something school never could: a deep understanding of people. He learned how to read a crowd, how to adjust his timing, and how to make people forget their troubles, if only for a moment. But underneath all the success, Red still carried memories of poverty and loss, and these shadows would never leave him completely. In 1930, Red's life changed again when he met Edna Stillwell. She was only 16, working as an usher at a theater. When she entered a dance marathon Red was hosting, Edna didn't just compete. She won, and she also won Red's heart. A year later, they married. But Edna was more than just a wife. She became his manager, his writer, and his strongest supporter. She believed in him when others didn't. Together, they came up with creative routines, including the famous Donut Dunkers sketch, where Red pantomimed different ways people dip donuts into coffee. It was a simple idea, but it became a hit. Soon, Red was performing in New York, and even at the White House for President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Edna handled the business, the contracts, and the writing. Even after they divorced years later, she continued to write for him. Their partnership proved that behind every great comedian, there is often someone quietly shaping their success. But while audiences laughed at his sketches, Red's private life was complicated, filled with personal struggles and the heavy burden of fame. By the late 1930s, Red Skelton was becoming a household name. His Donut Dunkers act on the Rudy Valley radio show made him a star almost overnight. Soon after, he landed his own programs, where characters like Junior the Mean Whittle Kid captured the nation's heart. His catchphrase, "I doed it," became so popular that newspapers used it in headlines during World War II. Children loved it so much that they even helped raise money to fund a bomber plane named We Doed It. At the same time, Red was making movies at MGM, appearing in over 30 films from the late 1930s through the 1940s. Films like Bathing Booty and The Fuller Brushman cemented his reputation as a reliable comedy star. His style was clean, warm, and family-friendly, something rare at a time when many comedians relied on politics or adult humor. Red gave people an escape. He gave them laughter that could be shared across generations. But what the audience did not know was that behind the smiles, Red often battled exhaustion, sadness, and the pressure of always being on. Just as Red was reaching the peak of his career, World War II interrupted everything. In 1944, he was drafted into the U.S. Army despite his fame and success. While some celebrities avoided service, Red went in without complaint. At first, the military used him for comedy shows to entertain soldiers. But the schedule was brutal. He sometimes performed 12 shows in a single day, traveling nonstop with little rest. His body and mind could not keep up. In April 1945, while performing in Italy, Red collapsed from exhaustion. He was sent back to the United States and admitted to a military hospital for 3 months. The public was told very little, but inside those hospital walls, Red struggled with a stutter and the emotional scars of burnout. He had given everything to make others laugh, but he had little left for himself. This hidden breakdown was one of the secrets he carried, a reminder that even the funniest clown could suffer deeply when the curtain fell. What made Red Skelton's story powerful was not just his success, but his ability to hide pain behind laughter. To the world, he was the cheerful clown who never told a dirty joke, the man families could watch without worry. But privately, he wrestled with the memories of poverty, the grief of losing his father, the exhaustion from nonstop performing, and the personal challenges of fame. Those who worked with him sometimes described rehearsals that were far less innocent than his public image suggested. After his death, lawyers even discovered a clause in his will that raised eyebrows, a detail that could have changed how people remembered him. Yet, despite everything, Red managed to keep the darker parts of his life mostly hidden. He believed that laughter was a gift to be shared, even if it came at a personal cost. In the end, Red Skelton's greatest secret was not a scandal, but the quiet truth that behind every smile he gave, there was a man carrying wounds that never fully healed. When World War II ended, Red Skelton returned to entertainment, but things were not the same. He was still recovering from the exhaustion and health struggles that had nearly broken him. Yet, instead of slowing down, he threw himself back into his work. In 1951, The Red Skelton Show debuted on television, and it became one of the most beloved programs in America. For 20 years, millions tuned in to watch Red perform his famous characters, slapstick routines, and heartfelt monologues. What set him apart was that he never needed dirty jokes or politics to be funny. He believed humor should unite families, not divide them. Children and grandparents could sit together and laugh at the same jokes, and that made Red special. His show featured live skits, pantomime, and even sentimental segments where he often ended by saying, "Good night, and may God bless." These simple words touched viewers, reminding them that Red was more than just a clown. He was a man with deep values. Behind the scenes, however, the pressure never ended. Writing weekly shows, performing for live audiences, and keeping his energy high took a toll. Friends sometimes noticed that after the cameras turned off, Red seemed quieter, more reflective, almost weighed down by his own thoughts. It was as if laughter was his gift to the world, but when he gave it away, he was left with emptiness inside. After decades in the spotlight, Red Skelton eventually stepped away from television, but his influence never faded. He continued performing in live shows and spent much of his later years painting clowns, images that seemed to reflect his own life, hiding tears behind painted smiles. Audiences adored him, but even in old age, he remained private about the struggles he carried. When he died in 1997 at the age of 84, stories emerged that surprised fans. Lawyers revealed clauses in his will that suggested he wanted to protect his legacy carefully, even to the point of controlling how his name and image could be used after death. Some insiders hinted that there were sides of Red the public never truly knew, moments of anger, sadness, or secrets that he kept buried behind the mask of the clown. Yet none of that erased the love people felt for him. He was remembered not only as one of America's greatest comedians, but also as a symbol of how laughter can heal, even when it comes from someone who is hurting inside. His life was proof that joy and pain can live side by side, and that sometimes the funniest people are the ones who understand sorrow the most. Red Skelton made the world laugh, but his hidden battles made his story even more human. In the end, his true legacy was not just comedy, it was resilience, compassion, and the reminder that even clowns carry heavy hearts behind the smiles they give away. While Red Skelton brought endless laughter to the world, one of the greatest tragedies of his life came from his role as a father. In 1947, Red and his second wife, Georgia Davis, welcomed a son named Richard. Red adored the boy, and he often spoke about how much joy Richard brought into his life. But happiness turned to heartbreak when, at only 10 years old, Richard was diagnosed with leukemia. In those days, treatments were limited, and the disease was often a death sentence. Red did everything he could, bringing in doctors, seeking prayers, and holding on to hope, but nothing stopped the illness. In 1958, Richard died at just 10 years old, and Red was devastated. The loss crushed him in ways that even his closest friends struggled to describe. On television, he continued to smile and perform, but privately, he carried a wound that never healed. His wife Georgia fell into deep grief as well, and the marriage suffered. Red often spoke later about how children's laughter reminded him of his son, and perhaps this is why his humor always carried a touch of innocence. The world never saw the tears he shed when the cameras turned off, but those who knew him understood that behind his cheerful characters was a grieving father who never truly recovered. Today, decades after his death, Red Skelton is still remembered as one of the greatest comedians of the 20th century. His clean humor, his funny characters, and his unique way of making families laugh together continue to be celebrated. Museums, books, and television specials keep his memory alive. In his hometown of Vincennes, Indiana, the Red Skelton Museum of American Comedy stands as a tribute to his life and work, filled with costumes, props, and stories of his long career. Fans often point out that what made Red different was not just his humor, but his heart. He gave to charities, supported veterans, and believed deeply in God and family values. Even those secrets about his personal struggles, private rehearsals, and the unusual clauses in his will added mystery to his legacy, none of that erased the love people had for him. Instead, it made his story even more human. Red Skelton proved that laughter is not just about jokes, it is about survival, healing, and connection. The man who made millions forget their troubles was also the man who carried heavy troubles of his own. In the end, that contrast is what keeps his legacy alive, a clown who taught us that sometimes the greatest gift comes from those who know pain most deeply.